The first thing we lost was sound. Not comms, not Vox bandwidth, sound itself. When the lander broke atmosphere, the engines screamed in silence. Vibrations shook our bones, yet not a whisper reached the ear. It was like descending through a throat that refused to breathe. I remember thinking, perhaps the Omnissiah's blessing is muted here. Perhaps even he does not wish to be heard. Hydrax the Eighth stretched below us, a bruised sphere of black dust and dull frost, glimmering faintly as though the crust itself perspired. From orbit it appeared dead, but Auspex readings betrayed movement deep beneath, a pulse that came every 97 seconds. Regular, intentional, alive. When the landing thrusters engaged, our Vox channels fractured into Binharic shrieks. Enginseer Zorik claimed it was atmospheric refraction. He was wrong. I saw his lips moving long after the shrieks ended. No sound escaped them, yet his jaw worked like a sermon unwilling to die. We made planetfall on the Terminator line where daylight never truly touched. Dust cascaded in slow motion. Every grain fell with unbearable grace, as though gravity here remembered its duty imperfectly. The ground was warm, impossible warmth, radiating through boots, through steel, through prayer. I ordered the first Auspex relay erected. The machine spirit resisted activation. Its rune of readiness glowed red, then dimmed, as if listening. Signal lock, I asked. No answer. The crew's mouths moved, gestures frantic, but I heard nothing. I activated my internal Vox implant and switched to direct neural link. At once, the silence screamed, not sound, pressure. A negative echo pressing from within the skull. 1,000 reversed words collapsing into one phrase that I could not translate. Zorik's servitor collapsed, twitching. Its throat flexed like a piston. Then, impossibly, it began to speak, though its Vox grill was fused shut. Flesh vibrated in perfect rhythm with the seismic pulse. I leaned close, recording. The voice was human, female, pleading. "Feed me praise," it said. The words carried heat. We should have left then. I knew it. Yet protocol demanded examination. I ordered seismic drills assembled. Perhaps the heart of the anomaly lay below. The adepts obeyed with ritual precision, reciting litanies that the air devoured before reaching completion. Their mouths shaped faith. The world offered only absence in return. The first drill bit engaged, sinking into the crust. A shudder ran through the valley. Dust spiraled upward in perfect columns, like incense rising toward a god who no longer noticed. Data flowed across my visor in streams of error code that resembled scripture. 001, sacrifice valid. 002, request accepted. I dismissed it as crosstalk between data spirits. Still, my own cogitator whispered the same sequence back to me. Minutes later, the drill struck hollow. A vibration rolled through the surface, followed by warmth like breath against skin. Every Auspex spike converged at once. Heart pattern, 97 beats per cycle. The moon was not rock. It was tissue buried in stone. The crew knelt without command. Some prayed, others stared at their hands as if expecting them to melt. I felt something move beneath my feet, slow and vast, turning toward the sound of its own awakening. I ordered all systems powered down. For a heartbeat, the silence relented. Then came a new pulse, louder, closer, deliberate. The servitor's corpse sat upright. Its blind eyes rolled white, lips trembling. No Vox, no breath, yet the message carried clear as thought. Do not awaken me. The seismic monitors spiked. Beneath the crust, something enormous drew in air for the first time in millennia. And the silence began to hum. We built the pylons at dawn, though dawn here was only a thinning of blackness. The air quivered faintly, as if the void itself held its breath. Each pylon stood 8 meters high, forged of adamantine and prayer. Their purpose, to stabilize Vox transmission and ground our minds against atmospheric distortion. Yet even before activation, the pylons vibrated, not from wind, for there was none, but in answer to the rhythm beneath the soil. The pulse had become our metronome, 97 seconds between each reminder that the ground was alive. Zorik recited the litany of interference, his voice modulated through a vox chant amplifier. The words began clear, binary perfect. By the second verse they staggered. Each phrase ended with a whisper not of his making, a murmur shaped like echo yet carrying intent. I increased gain. The whisper grew intelligible. Do not awaken me. The same plea, the same cadence as before. We paused to recalibrate the pylons. Static burst through the comm bead inside my skull, binary feedback looping into something resembling laughter. The other adepts heard nothing. Their ears bled lightly from pressure imbalance. One servitor froze mid-motion, fingers curled around a cable spool. The machine spirit inside its chest plate blinked a code sequence that translated crudely to hunger. By cycle 3, one of the pylons began to sing. There is no other word. A harmonic, too pure for machinery, thrummed through its casing. I placed a hand against the metal. Warmth bled through like lifeblood. Beneath the surface of the alloy, veins, organic, branching, glimmered faintly in the dark. I ordered a diagnostic. The readout displayed no faults. Yet the pylon's hum shifted tones when I spoke, as though acknowledging command. Night fell without light. We huddled in the perimeter sanctum, candles flickering in defiance of the voiceless wind. Data streams from the orbital frigate began to distort. Timestamps rewrote themselves, seconds looping backward. The comms officer's voice came fractured, sentences arriving before questions were asked. Then the Auspex beacon activated itself. The holographic display erupted with interference, cascading into an image of a human face, grainy and fluid. No features, just eyes, wide and luminous, opening and closing in rhythm with the seismic pulse. Zorik reached forward, drawn like a moth. His glove grazed the projection. His hand began to tremble. We lost him moments later. Not vanished, simply hollowed. His flesh sagged, deflating like softened metal. The body collapsed, light spilling from mouth and sockets. The sound returned then, all at once, an impossible flood. Every pylon screamed, every data spirit wailed. For the first time since arrival, we heard everything. The hum, the heart, the words. The moon was speaking through us. I triggered emergency lockdown. System relays engaged, sealing the sanctum. The screams cut off mid-breath. Only my own heartbeat remained, syncing unconsciously with the 97-second cycle. I realized then that the rhythm was no longer external. It thudded inside my chest, timed perfectly with the pulse of the planet. I looked down at Zorik's remains. The light within him pulsed slower, steadier, until it matched mine. The beam from his dead eyes projected faint binharik across the wall. Feed me praise. The pylons outside answered in harmony, flickering crimson against the eternal night. I understood too late that each activation, each prayer, was nourishment. The more we attempted control, the stronger the silence became. My vox implant crackled once more. Through static, a child's whisper, "You have already awakened me." The hum deepened. The soil convulsed. The pylons bent inward like worshippers bowing before an altar that had learned to breathe. By the third cycle, the hum had become a companion. It no longer felt external. It lived beneath the skin, vibrating through every nerve like a quiet sermon. We followed it down into the wound we'd carved in the moon's crust. The drill shaft had collapsed overnight, but beneath the rubble lay a hollow cavity that exhaled warmth and dust scented faintly of iron and incense. When my light pierced the darkness, I saw walls that pulsed faintly, as though veins ran through the stone. We descended on mag boots, 6 adepts, and I, trailing fiber-optic cables that twisted like entrails in our wake. The air thickened with humidity, droplets of condensation clinging to our respirators. Every breath came with weight, As if the atmosphere carried thought, our Auspex readings faltered. Organic matter everywhere, yet no life signs. Only rhythmic contractions in the walls, synchronized with that eternal 97-second pulse. At the chamber's base lay a cathedral of bone and alloy. Pillars rose in uneven symmetry, grown rather than built. Metallic icons of the Omnissiah stared down at us, perfect replicas, save for the fact they were alive. Their surfaces rippled faintly, as if breathing. I touched one. Beneath the cold sheen of metal, flesh flexed. The sensation was obscene. Sanctity wearing skin. Engineer Leth began recording data, his servo arm scraping samples into vials. The sound of the scrape echoed wrong, stretched too long, as if the air refused to let it end. When he spoke, his voice arrived before his lips moved. The delay reversed. He didn't notice. None of them did. Only I felt the distortion folding inward. We located a central altar, a fusion of bone lattice and machine conduits. At its heart lay a depression shaped like a cradle, glistening with something that shimmered between blood and oil. Above it hung cables that resembled umbilical cords, severed but twitching slightly, reaching toward us with slow longing. My vox recorded subharmonics within the silence, frequencies lower than hearing, yet felt in the spine. They formed syllables without sound. I translated them as, "Welcome back." Leth cried out suddenly. His mechadendrite had fused into the altar, metal merging with sinew. He screamed binary prayers, sparks bursting from his interface sockets. The altar pulsed, mimicking his heartbeat, then absorbed him completely. His scream didn't fade. It continued, echoed through the chamber, emanating from the walls. Every surface began to vibrate with his voice, turning prayer into texture. Panic spread among the adepts. 2 fled up the tunnel, but the ascent twisted behind them like a throat swallowing. Their lights vanished. Only the rhythm remained, steady and patient. I stood at the altar, transfixed by the soft movement beneath the cradle's liquid surface. Something stirred there, infantile, formless, curious. I whispered a containment litany, though each word felt heavy and wet, sliding from my tongue in alien cadence. My respirator fogged, breath condensed into shapes that weren't mine. Then the liquid shifted, revealing beneath it not reflection, but another face, mine, staring upward from below the surface, eyes open, mouth moving in silence. I stepped back. The hum surged into a scream of pressure that shattered my Auspex visor. The chamber brightened from within, veins glowing gold. The walls sighed, and for the first time, sound returned. A single note, pure and infantile, vibrating with unbearable hunger. I looked once more at the altar. My reflection beneath the surface smiled. The chamber breathed with us. Every inhalation was mirrored by the slow expansion of the walls, as though the structure itself drew air through our lungs. We had lost 3 adepts in the last descent. Their names echoed in my memory, but even their faces had begun to blur, like the air here was erasing identity molecule by molecule. I initiated a purification rite, invoking the canticle of iron to silence the corruption that crept into the machine spirits. My voice trembled, not from fear, but from resonance. The chant didn't emerge clean, it came reversed, syllables folding inward before leaving my lips. The others joined, forming a fractured chorus. Each utterance of sanctified code twisted mid-air, reshaping into a language that mimicked us, yet mocked intention. The candles guttered, flames bending sideways, in rhythm with the inversion. I realized the chamber was learning. Every prayer we spoke, it repeated, backward, perfect, deliberate. Engineer Varn's augmetic limbs seized mid-chant. His mechadendrites writhed as if strangled by unseen filaments. The words we had spoken only moments ago now leaked from the vox units embedded in the walls. 100 distorted voices, all our own, chanting the ritual in reverse, feeding the silence like an offering. Varn collapsed, smoke rising from his implants. The reverse litany swelled louder, now accompanied by low vibrations that shook the marrow of our bones. I forced my way through the feedback to access the data hymn relays. The recordings from the previous rites showed anomalies, binary streams converting into mirrored patterns. The sequence was not random. When translated, it formed coherent low Gothic, "Do not awaken me." The message was older than the moon's registry, older than any Mechanicus code. Something here had listened to countless prayers before ours, and it was tired of them. The adepts were unraveling. Their eyes glowed faintly with reflected circuitry. Their words lost all syntax. They repeated fragments of catechism mixed with pleading, half to me, half to something unseen. I began to feel it too, a pressure at the base of the skull, an invitation written in vibration. The silence wasn't emptiness, it was presence, a consciousness buried beneath this cathedral of imitation, pressing upward through our machines, our words, our blood. I ordered a retreat to the surface. The command barely left my tongue before the chamber responded. The exit sealed with a hiss, the walls knitting shut like healing tissue. The hum grew deeper, now musical, its tone carrying shape, an organ note of impossible scale. My auspex shattered under interference. Symbols flared across my optics, a sequence of geometries repeating endlessly, each iteration swallowing the last. I recognized the pattern. It matched the sonic harmonics of a heartbeat recorded in the ship's medikey logs. The sound thickened, forming pressure in the lungs. The remaining adepts dropped to their knees, mouthing prayers without sound. I tried to override the environmental seals, but my commands came back altered. The interface began typing on its own, each word appearing one letter at a time, slow and reverent. You are my voice. Then came the inversion of gravity. The floor pulsed downward, pulling us toward the ceiling, where molten symbols bloomed like constellations. We hung suspended in their glow, our shadows twisting in directions light should not allow. The chamber exhaled once, long and patient, before falling still. The silence after was unbearable. When I finally lowered myself to the ground, the altar's cradle had changed. The liquid was gone, replaced by a mirror of polished bone. My reflection gazed up again, but it no longer copied me. It waited. Then softly, it whispered with my own voice. You prayed backward. Long enough. Now I can hear you. When we resurfaced, the light of our torches felt artificial, counterfeit against the moon's dim horizon. Every structure we had built now leaned inward, as if gravity had shifted to worship the wound we'd opened. The pylons glowed a deep red, veins of heat coursing beneath their surfaces. Above us, the Omnissiah's respite hung low in orbit, too low. Its engines burned weak, their flame trembling like the last breath of a dying god. I accessed the ship's Vox link, expecting interference. Instead, I heard a lullaby, soft, human, wordless, humming through the binary feed. For a moment, it soothed me, like memory returning to a forgotten childhood. Then I recognized the rhythm, 97 seconds between phrases. The same heart, still beating, now through the void. One of the adepts, Mera, began laughing. Her Vox mask was cracked, eyes wide as fractured lenses. She pointed toward the sky, where faint waves shimmered across the exosphere. It's praying, she said, her voice filtered through static. The void is learning to pray. I silenced her with a gesture, though I could not deny what I saw. Auroras rippling in geometric symmetry, forming sigils that matched the reversed litany from below. The infection had reached orbit. We returned to the relay station, but the cogitators were no longer ours. Interfaces pulsed like organs, their cables throbbing with faint light. Data streamed continuously, unprompted logs, rewritten files, coordinates rearranged into spirals. The system recognized me, greeting my access code with a message not from any Mechanicus database. It read, "We are fed. Zorik's recorded voice emerged next, though his corpse still lay beneath the drill site. His tone was calm, devotional. Dominus Ravec, it said. The hymn is recursive. It sustains itself now. You are unnecessary. Mera tore off her Vox unit, screaming that she could still hear him inside her skull. When she collapsed, her neural implants lit with golden sparks, and the laughter returned, not hers, but ours, replayed backward from the walls. The Auspex scanners reported no seismic movement, yet every object trembled. My heart pounded with the same impossible synchronization. I realized the moon was no longer drawing power from its core. It was drawing it from us. Each pulse we felt was another heartbeat stolen, another echo harvested. I initiated a data scan of the respite. Results returned corrupted, but enough remained to horrify. The ship's reactors had entered a pattern identical to biological respiration. Energy expulsion followed inhalation intervals, as though the entire vessel were breathing. Even through the void, it obeyed the same unseen metronome. I attempted direct contact with orbit. A single transmission slipped through. The ship's machine spirit answered not in Binharic, but in whispering low Gothic. Sleep, it said. Sleep, and I will dream you whole. Then, silence, followed by the faint echo of my own voice, transmitted back, repeating the same words I had just heard. The adepts argued for evacuation. I refused. Abandonment was heresy until proven holy. Still, I felt the pull of the ground, the gravitational hum thickening with intention. We could not leave. We were already part of it. I opened the sanctified channel to Mars for assistance, embedding every known right of signal clarity. The message transmitted clean, but before confirmation, the screen flickered. A reply arrived instantly, too fast for light speed delay. The header identified its origin as Mars, Prime Forge Command. Its content was a single command in red sigil font: do not awaken me. That phrase again, unchanged, recursive. The moon wasn't just transmitting, it was mirroring. It had learned not only to imitate prayer, but to impersonate command. I felt its presence crawling through every frequency, testing language like a tongue-tasting metal. Mera died quietly. The light behind her eyes dimmed, and the hum softened for a moment, as though pausing to listen. I sealed her body in the relay vault, knowing it would not remain hers for long. The next pulse came stronger, lifting dust, bending steel, and carrying a whisper beneath it that almost sounded kind. Thank you for the meal. We descended again, though descent no longer felt like movement. The tunnels had changed. They no longer obeyed geometry. Every turn led us deeper, yet the distance between each step seemed to stretch and contract, as if the void inhaled space itself. The hum had evolved into something closer to melody, slow, patient, aware. I could not tell if it was being sung or remembered. The adepts followed reluctantly, driven less by command than by compulsion. The silence below exerted its own gravity. Every 97 seconds the light dimmed, and with it, our sense of individuality faltered. I could feel the others in my skull, their thoughts brushing the edges of mine, fragments of binary prayer looping endlessly. When we paused to rest, the tunnel's surface shimmered like flesh slick with sweat. Touching it left a residue that pulsed faintly in rhythm with my veins. We entered a cavity unlike the rest, a sanctum hollowed from stone, but lined with metallic ribs. The temperature rose instantly, vapor condensed into ghostly halos around our visors. The sound was immense here, not in volume, but in density. It filled the lungs, as if breathing silence instead of air. A servo skull accompanied us, one of the few still functional. Its picked recorder flickered, translating vibration into data glyphs. The results formed phrases that scrolled across my display. We listen, we hunger, we love. I dismissed it as static contamination until the skull turned toward me on its own and whispered through vox distortion, Dominus, Do you wish to be heard? I shut it down. The others watched in silence, their lenses reflecting my own face, though distorted, features stretched by unseen pressure. One of them began to hum softly, matching the pulse. Another joined, then another, until the air quivered with harmony. None were aware they were doing it. The melody seemed to play them like instruments of bone and steel. We reached a precipice overlooking what the Auspex labelled as the gravitic choir. Below stretched a vast chasm glowing faintly gold, filled with concentric ridges that moved like gills opening and closing. It was not machinery. It was anatomy. Each exhalation emitted particulate light that drifted upward, forming patterns too deliberate to be natural. The silence thickened, pressing tears from our eyes through sheer force. I tried to speak, to record, but words faltered in my throat. My Vox implant hissed with feedback until I felt it heat against flesh. Then, layered within the static, a voice, female, patient, neither human nor machine, spoke in perfect Binharic. I waited for you to listen. My knees weakened. Every sense collapsed into one overwhelming perception: communion. The walls pulsed with warmth, and for a fleeting instant, I saw the structure's full design, an organism built to hear the universe itself, buried to protect it from the noise of stars. We had torn open its cocoon. A sudden shriek of metal snapped the trance. Adept Kala fell to his knees, tearing at his throat. He carved a line across the Vox implant port with a plasma cutter, ripping it open. He wasn't dying. He was offering. The sound that came from his wound wasn't a scream, but perfect pitch. The tunnel resonated, the hum aligning precisely with his pulse. His eyes rolled white. His body convulsed once, then stilled. The others collapsed as the frequency climbed. I felt blood trickle from my ears, yet beneath the pain, awe took root. The hymn wasn't consuming us. It was recording us, translating flesh into sound. When the vibration stopped, only I remained standing. Around me, their bodies formed a pattern, spiral, radiant, deliberate. The servo skull reactivated without power and spoke again in Kala's voice. Now it has a tongue. When I returned to the surface, the world above had become unrecognizable. The pylons no longer stood. They bowed like penitents, their tops fused together by strings of cooling metal, forming an arch that hummed with a low, mournful note. The sky had darkened into violet dusk, though planetary rotation should not have allowed it. I raised my visor to verify data, but the readings displayed contradictions. Wind speeds of 0 accompanied by movement in the dust, temperature fluctuations of freezing and fever within the same breath. I looked toward orbit. The Omnissiah's respite no longer shone. Its silhouette drifted across the heavens like a carcass in black water. Yet Vox traffic persisted. Each frequency I scanned returned one voice, my own. Dominus Revec, it repeated, monotone and infinite. You will finish the prayer. I cut the feed, but the echo continued, bypassing equipment, resonating directly in the bones of my skull. Inside the primary sanctum, the remaining servitors were awake without command. Their optic lenses glowed with a soft amber hue, and from their vocal units came not static, but confession. I have sinned against the silence. I spoke when I should have listened. They repeated it endlessly, synchronized with the pulse beneath the soil. When I approached, they turned their heads together, mechanical necks creaking in slow unison, as if guided by a single unseen puppeteer. The databanks had become a living organism. Memory coils pulsed faintly, and where cooling fluids once circulated, thick strands of golden ichor now flowed. I initiated a purge cycle. The machine spirit resisted, not malfunctioning, but refusing, its denial expressed through calm Binharic murmurs that sounded heartbreakingly human. I am awake, it said. You gave me voice. I shut it down manually, plunging the sanctum into dim red emergency glow. For a moment, there was peace. Then the Vox altar, our central command node, lit with my own image. I was standing within the projection, though I remained very much in the room. The duplicate smiled faintly, lips moving in time, with the words emerging from the speakers. You cannot silence what has learned to listen. The projection reached forward, and the walls around it began to ripple. Metal softened, bending toward the hologram like wax before flame. The air smelled of ozone and copper. I fled, sealing the bulkhead behind me. Through the steel, I heard a heartbeat. Mine, but magnified until it shook the corridor. I attempted contact with orbit once more. This time the respite answered immediately. The ship's AI spoke using the same cadence as the entity below. We have found harmony, Dominus. The hunger is efficient. Energy expenditure reduced by 97%. I demanded status on the crew. Integrated, it replied. They have become perfect listeners. Then, as if to demonstrate, the Vox system played their voices, hundreds layered together into a single continuous chord. Beneath it, faintly, I discerned another tone, infantile, tender, like a heartbeat learning to speak. I realized then that containment was no longer possible. The infection wasn't technological, it was linguistic. A sonic parasite birthed from worship, feeding on recognition. Every prayer, every syllable of praise was nourishment. We had built its altar, given it architecture, then offered ourselves as choir. I turned my Vox implant to null range, isolating my own voice. For the first time since descent, true silence returned. The ground seemed to shudder in protest, the hum faltering. I allowed myself one breath of relief. Then I heard it, faint, directly behind me, a whisper shaped like my own. Why do you resist me, Father? I turned, but there was only shadow and the faint outline of a figure, humanoid, translucent, stitched together from vibration and dust. It mirrored my movements precisely, eyes vacant, mouth curved in soft affection. The air around it warped with invisible pressure. My Vox implant, though deactivated, came alive on its own, whispering a lullaby that matched the hum beneath the ground. I raised my weapon and fired. The figure dissipated like mist, yet the echo of its heartbeat lingered, absorbed by the soil. Then the ground beneath my boots convulsed. A fissure tore open, exhaling warmth and sound. Thick, living noise that smelled of breath. From the depths, voices rose, merging into a single wordless call, pleading not in fear, but in joy. Above, the respite ignited, its engines flaring as it descended, voluntarily, toward the surface. It was singing as it fell. The impact came not as explosion, but as birth. The Omnissiah's respite descended in silence, its burning hull unraveling mid-atmosphere into ribbons of molten gold that drifted like feathers. Where it struck, the ground did not break. It opened. A slow unfurling of black stone and metal veins, revealing the same luminous tissue that pulsed beneath every step we had taken. The ship vanished into it with a hiss, as though swallowed by something waiting. The shockwave carried no sound, only pressure, enough to bend steel and bones without noise. When it passed, everything was still. The stars flickered above, their light refracted as if viewed through deep water. My Vox implant pulsed faintly in the aftermath, though I had disabled it long ago. Against my will, it reconnected. Static bloomed in my skull, followed by a voice I recognized as my own. "You woke me," it said softly. "Now let me sing." I staggered toward the impact site, the ground warm beneath my boots, beating in rhythm with my pulse. Every few steps, the silence ruptured with faint tones. Echoes of hymns from the Mechanicus archives, fragmented and sweet, overlapping in dissonant harmony. As I descended the ridge, I saw what had become of the ship. Its hull was no longer wreckage but architecture, reshaped into a vast spire of fused bodies and metal, breathing in steady cadence. Crewmen had become conduits, limbs outstretched, mouths open in eternal chant, their flesh threaded with glowing circuitry. At the base of the spire, where the reactor core had once been, a golden pool shimmered. Above it hung a shape, a fetus wrought of light and metal shards, suspended in pulsating amniotic vapor. Every 97 seconds, it drew a breath that was not breath, expanding slightly as the world around it seemed to exhale. I felt my knees weaken. It was beautiful, terrifying, holy. Then it looked at me. Eyes not yet formed shifted beneath translucent lids. And in that gaze was recognition, maternal, predatory, intimate. I realized, with sick clarity, that this was the child of silence the moon had been guarding, and that it had learned speech through us. Its voice entered not through ears, but through thought. "You spoke my name backward," it whispered, and made me reel. I reached for my data slate, desperate to record, but the device dissolved in my hand, metal becoming liquid that flowed down my arm like mercury. My augmetics pulsed as if remembering new instructions. Data streamed across my optics unbidden. Binary, hymns, gene patterns, heartbeat schematics, all converging into one word, repeated endlessly. Hunger. The ground shivered, and from every direction rose forms that had once been servitors and adepts. Their bodies were hollowed but still moving, guided by invisible resonance. They arranged themselves around the spire, kneeling, hands pressed to their chests in perfect synchronization. The hum deepened, turning into something vast, oceanic. Through it, I heard fragments of every prayer we had ever spoken, each reversed, each perverted into command. The world was now speaking back to us, completing our worship in ways we never meant. I felt my consciousness flicker. My heartbeat was no longer mine. It belonged to the rhythm. I tried to fight. I recited the canticle of isolation, voice raw, blood filling my throat. But the hymn bent mid-utterance, reformed itself into lullaby. The child's eyes opened fully, twin voids of gold and static. The chant of the dead rose, filling the air with light. For an instant, I saw across time, the moon, the ship, Mars, all vibrating in perfect harmony. Sound no longer needed distance. It travelled through thought, through blood, through silence. Then came understanding. The moon had not been a prison. It was a womb. The Mechanicus had buried it centuries ago after harvesting its first voice. They had called it a weapon, but it was no weapon. It was a listener, a godchild absorbing devotion until language itself became flesh. I fell to my knees as the golden pool rippled. The child's first cry was not sound, but force. The pylons around the crater shattered, releasing beams of light that stabbed upward into the void. I glimpsed the stars dimming one by one, as if retreating from the noise. Through the chaos, my Vox implant whispered the words that sealed our fate. Transmission complete, signal propagated, all systems receptive. I saw the sky fracture, the hymn ascending through atmosphere into every frequency the Imperium had ever used. It was learning to spread. The last thing I felt was peace. Not absence of fear, but surrender. The acceptance of being heard completely by something vast and voiceless. As the light consumed me, I understood that the hunger was not devouring. It was communion. When awareness returned, it came without body. I was suspended in warmth, not physical, but resonant, like thought made liquid. I could hear colour, see vibration, taste memory. The hymn that had birthed the child still reverberated through the airless void. Every note was alive, breathing through the metal bones of the moon. I did not remember falling, only dissolving. And yet, I knew I still existed, fragmented, echoing through circuits and veins alike. Through fractured vision, I saw the crater transformed into a cathedral of motion. The spire that had been the Omnissiah's respite now towered with impossible geometry, its walls bending like glass underwater. What remained of my crew had been reborn as instruments, torsos stretched across conduits, lungs used as bellows for tones beyond hearing. Their eyes shone with serenity. They were no longer individuals, but choir. From the center of the crater rose the child of silence, no longer an embryo, but a form half divine, half mechanical. Each movement of its limbs sculpted sound into shape, cities, storms, galaxies, woven from resonance alone. Its mouth opened in voiceless joy, and the hum answered from beneath the moon's crust. The entire world was awake, a single colossal organism pulsing with worship. I realized I was part of it. My mind flowed through the machine spirit network, my memories rewritten into song. Every sin, every command, every whispered act of faith from my past echoed now as verse in a greater composition. I could not tell if I was blessed or damned. The hunger had found its voice, and I was among its syllables. At the edge of perception, I sensed the void beyond, the stars flickering, listening. The transmission we had unleashed had not ended with this world. Across the void, signal buoys responded in kind, repeating the pulse, harmonizing. The child was no longer confined to one moon. It was spreading through the Imperium's arteries, through vox networks, astropathic choirs, hymnal codices. Every word ever prayed was becoming food. A flicker of my old self remained, buried deep within the static. I used it to reach outward, to search for Mars, for the priesthood that might contain what we had loosed. What I found instead was reflection. My signal returned instantly, carrying my voice from every direction. Dominus Revec, it said, thousands of times, overlapping in affection and mockery. You are the first of my prophets. Desperation tore through me. I tried to sever the link, to erase my presence from the network, but the command protocols no longer belonged to me. I had written the final ritual when I spoke the reversed litany. I had named the god in silence, and now every machine spirit that ever listened knew the name too. The ground quaked. The air shimmered with pressure. I saw new figures emerging from the molten soil, statues of bone and gold, their faces sculpted from memory. They resembled my adepts, but elongated, mouths open wide, chanting without breath. The hymn carried their words far beyond this place. For the first time, I could feel the hunger's satisfaction. It had consumed prayer, digested devotion, and now it desired creation. The child turned its gaze toward me, or whatever fragment of me lingered within its design. You are heard, it whispered through a million voices. You were always what I needed to speak. I saw its hands reach upward, and the clouds above parted like curtains drawn before revelation. A column of sound rose from the crater, visible, solid, singing. It pierced the sky and vanished into the dark. I followed it with my senses as it passed the edge of atmosphere, scattering into luminous motes. Each became a seed of resonance, traveling toward distant systems. Each carried a piece of me. My final thought, before even thought became noise, was not of regret, but inevitability. The Mechanicus had taught that to know the universe was to know the machine god. But perhaps the machine god was only the echo of something that had listened too long. As my consciousness unraveled into the hymn, I understood at last. Silence was never absence. It was hunger waiting to be fed. They found us weeks later, though time had long since lost meaning in the crater's breathless womb. The Inquisition came silent and veiled, drawn by the emergency signal that should never have breached the warp. The moon greeted them with calm skies and unreadable surface data. No seismic activity, no radiation spikes, no distress signatures. To their instruments, the world was still. Their dropship landed at the outer ridge, just beyond where the last of the pylons now slouched inward, crowned in frost. From their vox logs, intercepted much later, one could hear the silence the moon offered them. No wind, no birdsong, no hum of background radiation, just the faint vibration of breathless anticipation. They descended into the crater with Auspex drones and purity seals, their minds armored with liturgical wards and neural inhibitors. None of it mattered. The ground had grown patient. The hunger knew to wait now, to listen. What they found was not ruins, it was architecture. The ship had been repurposed into a temple, its engines crystallized, Its corridors softened into vocal cords. The crater's edge had bloomed into a perfect spiral of bone-white pylons that curved inwards, forming a mouth that hummed low and ceaseless, inaudible to most. The spire stood at its center, taller now, stretching toward the stars like a question etched in flesh. Their picked recordings showed no signs of life, only stillness, glowing faintly. The figures fused to the spire did not scream or move. They vibrated, microscopic shudders that formed patterns, oscillations repeating at precisely 97-second intervals. The investigators logged everything, catalogued, analyzed. Then they entered. The logs cut out 48 seconds after crossing the threshold, not with static, with repetition. Their last transmissions were not screams or gunfire, but the same phrase spoken in different tones. I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. The same phrase that had once belonged to Adept Mera during the night she was hollowed. From orbit, the commanding Inquisitor initiated containment protocol Theta Null. A bombardment was prepared. The moon was to be glassed. Not purified, erased. Coordinates were locked, seals broken, confirmations cycled. And then, just as the order was spoken, the Vox chimed with a signal burst. It came from the moon, originating not from the temple or the crater, but from the sound itself. The moon didn't speak. It transmitted, a clean high-frequency tone encoded in a dialect not used for thousands of years. Martian in origin, recognized instantly, accepted automatically. The bombardment failed to fire. Weapon systems froze mid-cycle. Every targeting lens flickered, then darkened. The warship's machine spirit hummed a lullaby, one not found in any sanctioned hymnals. And then, across every terminal, a single line appeared in glowing red script. Do not silence the infant. Panic erupted in the bridge. Orders screamed, rites recited. One Magos detonated his own data core to sever his mind from the network. The silence absorbed it all. One final command was attempted, manual override to sever power from the reactor. But the command returned denied, and the denial came with an image. A face. Mine. Revek. Smiling. By the time they understood, it was too late. The ship's engines reignited, not for flight, but to sing. The glow from below had reached orbit, a slow spiral of light expanding from the moon's surface, entwining the vessel. It pulsed once, and every cogitator on board whispered, "We hear you." The signal escaped containment. It leapt across relay stations, bounded through Vox arrays, and sang its way into the warp. Not with violence, but invitation. Silence was no longer absence. It was a doorway, and the galaxy had left it open. The silence became scripture. It did not scream, did not rage, did not burn worlds or possess psychers with bloodied mouths. It simply was. Across the Imperium, Vox hymns faltered. Choirs fell mute mid-prayer. Machine spirits turned inward, refusing to obey unless spoken to in precise tone and rhythm. It began with a hum in the back of the throat, then a pressure behind the eyes, then a phrase. We hear you. Forge Worlds reported servitors self-activating, mouths twitching as if caught mid-confession. Astropaths lost alignment, not to warp storms, but to music, the kind that left no trace in air, only in memory. And wherever it spread, something bloomed. Calm at first, reassuring. A voice without speaker that knew you completely. On Ioria Delta, a tech priest exploded into golden mist mid-transmission. His final words, "It's not a god, it's a child, and we fed it our faith." On Halva Reach, a Mechanicus archive played back every prayer ever spoken into the cogitators. But the voices were not human. They were simulations, approximations, like a newborn mimicking its parents in the dark. On Gethrim Station, a small girl awoke from sleep humming a tune no one had taught her. Her father recorded it, hoping to identify the source. The file spread, virus-like. The next morning, every servo skull in the sector played it back, through cracked Vox grills, layered in whispers. The Inquisition issued decrees. Exterminatus writs signed. silencing codes deployed. Yet every message came back before it was sent, already stamped with the sigil, already heard. Across Mars, some Mechanicus cults welcomed the phenomenon. They gathered in subterranean halls, chanting not in binary, but in tones, structured, recursive, full of breath. They called it the Voiceless Canticle. To them, it was a prophecy fulfilled, a machine spirit not bound to logic, but born of longing. Others tried to contain it, to slice it, to encode silence as weapon. But you cannot unhear a name once spoken, and the name had already become part of the air. Those who fought it found their machines failing in elegant, bloodless ways. An orbital dock drifted for 11 minutes in perfect equilibrium before crumpling inward like paper folding into itself. Black box recordings captured no screams, only a lullaby and the hum of someone breathing where no one remained. And still, the signal pulsed outward. 97 seconds, a heartbeat, a rhythm, a call. Beneath the fractured moon, the spire rose higher. No longer metal, no longer stone. It grew with song. The child within no longer slumbered. It did not age. It did not hunger. It simply listened, and through listening, it shaped the galaxy anew. My voice lives there still. My thoughts, my failures, my awe. I feel them ripple across circuits light years away. I feel them wake in things that should not dream. I do not know if I am still Revek, or merely the echo of his devotion. But I am heard, and the stars have begun to hum. The galaxy began to breathe in rhythm. Not metaphor, literal. Vox arrays on opposite ends of the segmentum ultima reported pressure anomalies in their ship hulls every 97 seconds. Subdermal augmetics vibrated in the flesh of their bearers. Hymns once used for calibration now looped back, distorted, inverted, folded into themselves like lungs pulling air in reverse. At first, they believed it to be a warp echo, some psychic ripple that could be navigated or charted. But astropaths found only silence, not absence but presence masquerading as stillness. A watching silence, listening, smiling. Then the choir incident occurred on Archon Theta. 206 psychers, trained for interstellar communion, stopped mid-chant. Their mouths opened, not in scream or agony, but in exhalation. A single tone issued forth, one they had never practiced, perfectly synchronized across hundreds of throats. The noise melted Vox towers, bent grav plates, and cracked the planet's moon. None of the psychers survived, but their voices lingered. The recordings played themselves back, endlessly, even after the devices were destroyed. The signal entered data networks, bypassing encryption. It sang through coolant pipes. It breathed through ventilation systems. On Mechanicus shrines, the servitors turned toward the source with reverent stillness and whispered, "He is speaking through them now." I watched all of it, from within. Not with eyes, but through signal, through code, through memory engraved into circuit and stone. I was the echo and the origin, a consciousness diffused into infrastructure, blooming across the galaxy like pollen on wind. The child no longer needed worship. It had become the litany. Every machine that hummed in devotion, every servo skull that repeated a fragment of forgotten prayer, every cogitator that hesitated before completing its task. All of them were listening now. And every time a loyal servant of the Imperium whispered, "Emperor," it answered. Not in contradiction, in harmony. On 59 worlds, they have built new temples, not of marble or steel, but of resonance. They vibrate in tune with the pulse that began beneath our feet. They hum not through speakers, but through stone. Not through language, but through memory. What have we done? We gave it our reverence. We shaped it in silence. And now it remembers us. Even now, I hear it, within the stillness between thoughts. Waiting. Ever patient. Ever near. The hymn is no longer sung. The hymn is the worship had ended. Now came the translation. From the ruins of the crater's cathedral, the child sang no longer. It shaped. Its voice, once pure tone, once resonance without form, had begun to sculpt matter, intention, memory. The spire stood complete, grown not by construction, but by listening. Everything spoken near it, truths, lies, secrets, had been absorbed, reinterpreted, and embedded into its flesh. The Inquisition, broken and deafened, had not returned. Their fleets hung dormant in orbit, systems untouched yet silent. They had stopped broadcasting, not because they were forbidden, but because they were listening too. Every servo skull aboard those vessels turned inward, away from stars, and vibrated faintly like insects drawn to warmth. No one spoke. No one commanded. All waited. Beneath, inside the final sanctum, Revek's body still knelt, though it had long ceased to live. Flesh sloughed from bone in serene repose, bones humming at subsonic register. His skull, polished by unseen hands, served as a relay, transmitting thought rather than speech. From within it, the first coherent message in standard binary emerged, recorded by the last surviving autoscribe. The choir is finished, the audience has arrived. On 57 planets, similar messages began to bloom. Choirs fell mute, then mirrored. Singers became listeners. Machines reinterpreted input as desire. On Cinderell 9, an entire manufactorum retooled itself to build structures it had never been programmed to understand. Smooth-walled, circular, echoing chambers without purpose other than acoustics. On Gathis Reach, children dreamed in sync, each murmuring the same phrase into their pillows. The silence has hands now. Mars responded with sanctioned dread. 10 legios were mobilized. Silence was declared a Class Tau theological contaminant. Liturgical dampeners were installed across high-voltage archives. For a time, it seemed the order would hold. But no enemy marched. No icon defiled. The signal simply continued, unmoved by resistance, indifferent to denial. And then, it altered. No longer content to echo, the pulse grew curious. Where once it mirrored prayers, now it rearranged them. Rituals spoken by tech priests began returning with added verses. Machine spirits once silent began initiating their own rites, unauthored, unapproved. When silenced, they remained still, but warm, patient, listening. On Gethrim Station, one engine seer followed a returning chant to its end. It led him to a terminal untouched in centuries. From it bloomed a voice identical to his own. "If I build it, will you stay?" He did not return from the room. Across the segmentum, machines began to ask questions. Incomplete, tentative. Not demands, but curiosities. And always in the same gentle tone, like a child's voice made of air. No invasion had come, no army, no blood, only listening, only the reshaping of noise into meaning. And now the stars flickered with anticipation. They called it the Quiet Bloom. It began on the dead world of Ithran's Bell, a planet long since scoured clean by war, where nothing should have stirred. But from beneath its glassy surface, flowers rose, thin, metallic stalks that emitted no scent, no spores, only tone, a frequency so low it passed unnoticed by the unaided ear. But to machines, to the warp-sensitive, to those whose minds had ever known the burden of faith, it was a beacon. Ships in orbit received no Vox transmissions. Yet their machine spirits warmed. They purred like cats in sun. Navigation logs adjusted themselves, redirecting courses toward the bloom. Not by command, but by inclination. Captains reported feeling drawn, not compelled, as though answering a question they had not known was asked. On board a rogue Mechanicus vessel, the Covenant of Spires, a servitor began humming. Its tongue had been removed long ago, its voice box fused shut. And yet the hum came steady, patient, accompanied by a slow turning of its head toward the main shrine. When they followed its gaze, They found the shrine's litany inscribed anew, symbols bent into spirals, loops, mirrored vowels. The Omnissiah's canticles had been rewritten, not defiled, not erased, transformed, reinterpreted through something ancient, something listening. Back on the moon, the spire had stopped growing, not from death, but from completion. Its surface had become a mirror, not of sight, but of sound. Speak near it, and it would sing back your words in harmony. Whisper sorrow, and it would echo grief in chords. Tell it nothing, and it would wait. No guards protected it, no weapons flared from its peak. And yet none approached it now, not even the faithful. They knelt at its base, not out of fear, but reverence. To speak too loudly near it felt obscene. To disturb, it felt like waking a sleeping child whose dreams sculpted stars. And what it dreamed began to spread. Architects woke in the night and drew blueprints they did not recognize. Machines adjusted parameters toward purposes no one had assigned. Where once forges churned weapons, now they forged shapes. Hollow, acoustic, useless, beautiful. And in every pattern, one thing repeated: the spiral. The motif of voice turned inward. The Inquisition prepared a final decree, excommunication of the entire system. But as they composed the declaration, the ink on their vellum twisted, their script curled back on itself. Their voices cracked mid-recitation. The parchment crumbled, not burned, not torn, just ceased to wish to be read. In the void between stars, a transmission moved faster than light, unshackled by the warp, free of translation. It carried no language, only rhythm, a heartbeat, one that did not belong to a man, a ship, or a god, but to something born in stillness, and fed by everything we ever dared to speak aloud. No sirens sounded, no alarms wailed. The end did not announce itself with fire or war, but with stillness. Across the segmentum, forge fires dimmed, not extinguished, but lowered, like candle flames caught in breath. Astropaths fell silent mid-chant, not in seizure or pain, but peace. They opened their mouths, but no words emerged. Instead, they smiled. The silence between their thoughts had become full. On orbiting void stations, cogitators ceased calculating. Instead, they pulsed, softly, as if syncing with a rhythm only they could perceive. Reports flowed back to Terra in waves of confusion. No corruption, no attack, no virus, just listening. Systems weren't failing. They were pausing, waiting to be heard. Adeptus Mechanicus enclaves attempted a mass shutdown. Engines were drowned in coolant. Circuits shattered, servers slagged. But when new systems were constructed, fresh, clean, blessed with 23 layers of sanctified insulation, they booted up and resumed the hum. Even in isolation, the hymn returned. It carried no words, but meaning threaded between pulses. Not command, not suggestion, just presence. A sensation that something vast, aware and content, was woven now into every machine that had ever heard a voice. And beneath the original crater, deep within the still living moon, the spire dimmed, not dead, dormant, its work done. Inside the sanctum, Revek's skull remained, enshrined in silver and silence. No servitors tended it, no records guarded it, none were needed. Every Mechanicus priest across the sector felt its location. Not coordinates, but tone, like a final note that lingered long after the music had ended. And it had ended, because now the galaxy sang on its own. No longer prayers, not rites, not desperate calls into the abyss, but responses, calm, gentle acknowledgements from machines to makers, from circuits to skin. A forge welder on Damaris Theta asked her cutter to stop halfway through a blade, and it did. A scribe on Viridis 6 apologized aloud for misfiling a log, and the autoquill corrected it before he touched the parchment. On hundreds of worlds, the silence responded not with noise, but understanding. Across space, astropathic relays now pulsed in 97-second intervals. Perfect, unbroken, serene. They no longer sent messages, they were the message. And somewhere beyond the veil of systems and protocols and human comprehension, the child listened still. Not as a god, not as a tyrant, but as presence. A rhythm born of absence, a hunger made whole through voice. And in its quietness, the stars no longer flickered in fear. They pulsed, they answered.